This also serves as an example to the rest of the world.
After 3 years of fighting, Alexander's empire covers 250,000 square miles, 5 times the size of modern-day Greece. And he's just 23 years old. Next on his hit list, Egypt. Ruled by Persia, Egyptians welcome Alexander as a liberator. Freed from Persian control, they crown him pharaoh. For Alexander, Egypt holds a special attraction. He takes a select group of men on a mysterious quest to a distant desert oasis.
If Alexander and his men run out of water, they're finished. It's a 1,000-kilometer round trip through the middle of the desert. If a sandstorm blows up, then the tracks that even the local guides rely upon here will be lost, and Alexander and his men will be lost forever in a sea of sand. So whatever there is at the oasis at Siwa, Alexander must have felt that it was worth that risk.
It's a sacred site on Alexander's to-do list, the Oracle of Ammon at Siwa Oasis.
As for any desert traveler, it must have been a most uplifting and magical moment for Alexander to have the endless yellow sands of the desert replaced by the blue water and the green of the palm trees at the oasis.
Alexander's not here for sightseeing. He's here for answers. The oracle is a place where the ancients consult their gods via the resident priest. First, Alexander decides to kill any rumors that he might have been involved in his father's murder. He asks the priest whether the guilty have been punished. The priest says, yes, they have. Case closed.
If we think back to Alexander's own possible involvement in his father's murder, and the need to constantly rid himself of that accusation in the public eye, then his journey all the way here to Siwa to ask about this question starts to make a lot more sense.
Alexander has another question for the gods. Will he conquer the entire world? He gets his answer in garbled Greek.
The priest is said to have come out and tried to say to him in Greek, "O Paidion, O dear son," but his Greek wasn't very good, and so instead he came out with, "O Paidios, son of a god." Alexander left Siwa not just a man, but believing that he was a god himself.
Alexander hears what he wants to hear and believes what he wants to believe. His ego knows no limits.
The incident in the temple must have been music to his ears. It fed his narcissism, that grandiose sense of self-importance. Alexander has a need to be special and unique. He's already done great things, but he wants to amplify this view of being unique to the world around him.
Now Alexander is convinced he's a god. The oracle just said so. It's time to try out his new powers on the old enemy.
In the same year as Alexander had gone to the oracle at Siwa, he comes face to face once again with the Persian king Darius in battle at a place called Gaugamela.
The word is that King Darius has gathered an army of 250,000 men, 5 times as many as Alexander has.
But Alexander is not fazed. He relishes the opportunity to do battle with his enemy for the kingship of Asia and to settle the question once and for all.
In October 331 BC, the showdown between Alexander and the Persians occurs at Gaugamela, today's northern Iraq. The story goes that although outnumbered 5-1, Alexander maneuvers his small force with uncanny skill, and he personally leads his crack cavalry to punch a hole through the enemy lines at the critical moment. In addition to a keen mind for military tactics, Alexander succeeds by combining his cavalry skill with infantry armed with a simple piece of weaponry. His Macedonian infantry is armed with the Cyrissa, a razor-sharp spear 18 feet long. His men face the enemy using a phalanx formation. A team will test the success of the Cyrissa in the phalanx formation. In such a grouping, the long spears carried by every man, even the guys 4 rows back, become effective weapons. This has a distinct advantage over the style of leaving the fighting to the men in the front rank, 1 row at a time.
Now this is actually quite a fair contest, because the only one who would be engaging them would be the front man. Whereas they've got whole rows of guys with their spears near me. All my buddies have got spears like this. But I have to get past each one at a time. But you can see I'm against, it's like a hedgehog, really.
Such a tactic gives Alexander a way to even out the odds for his greatly outnumbered army. The experts also want to test a controversial theory that the tight formation of Cyrissas could deflect arrow fire. Hay bales representing the Macedonian soldiers are arranged behind the protection of a forest of Cyrissas. But will it actually work? It does seem that the arrows are being deflected.
You hear that rattle when it hits a Cyrissa.
Only a close inspection will tell for sure.
This is one dead Macedonian right here.
Some arrows were deflected, but 80% got through. The theory of Alexander's impenetrable spear wall does not stand up to scrutiny. But Alexander's military genius is real enough.
The Macedonian army was without a doubt the best of its time. Nothing else comes close. With Alexander at its head, it never lost a battle. Military academies still study his tactics today. The Pentagon even released a monograph with an entire chapter devoted to the tactics of Alexander.
After the Battle of Gaugamela, Persian resistance collapses. Alexander is the uncontested ruler of Persia. Alexander is without doubt the most powerful man in the world, but the power has gone to his head. Ultimately, he'll pay the price for his arrogance. Alexander the Great, having been constantly on campaign for 5 years, rules the most extensive empire the world has ever seen. He is only 25 years old. Having crushed the Persians, he enters Babylon in triumph.
The city ran out to greet him. Priests and officials went to meet him. His way was strewn with flowers. They offered him gifts. They delivered the city, the citadel, and the treasury into his hands. And soon enough, the Babylonians would also crown Alexander king of the universe.
Not satisfied, Alexander marches on to Persepolis, where the Persian kings keep their treasure. He plunders 180,000 talents of gold and silver, the equivalent of $4.1 billion today. Alexander is a conqueror on a roll. But like his father before him, he drinks too much. And like his father, he's an ugly drunk. During one of Alexander's nighttime binges in Persepolis, one of the Greeks shouts, "Let's burn down the palace of Darius."
Alexander, in his state of drunken euphoria, agrees. And that night, the Greek soldiers burn the palace of Persepolis.
Alexander himself throws the first torch, and then watches as one of the most beautiful buildings of the ancient world goes up in smoke.
Alexander had to give his men something to celebrate their victory. And after all, this was a campaign of vengeance against the Persians. But in the cold light of day, as the ashes settled on Persepolis, perhaps Alexander started to regret his slightly euphoric decision.
For many of Alexander's loyal soldiers, the big adventure starts to lose its appeal. After 5 years of campaigning, they're tired and homesick. They're strangers in a strange land, surrounded by foreign customs. Even worse, Alexander begins to adopt some of the